It is the first warm Saturday in April, and you are standing in the garden center with a cart, looking at 3 pallets stacked with bags. One of them says compost, one says composted manure, one says leaf mold, if your store even carries it. Through the plastic, they all look like the same black, crumbly stuff. They are priced within a couple of dollars of each other. And the young fellow in the apron who's doing his best tells you they are all about the same, so take whichever one is on sale. So you take the sale bag home and you spread it on the vegetable bed, and by the middle of July you are standing over those same tomato plants with a spray bottle in your hand, wondering why the leaves went soft and floppy and why the aphids found you again. I did exactly that for years, but those 3 bags are not the same thing, not even close, and they were never meant to compete with each other. They each do one job, and 2 of them cannot do the third one's work at all. Stay with me to the end, because one of those 3 can actually bring more aphids into your garden instead of fewer. It comes down to one specific thing nitrogen does to brand new growth, and once you understand it, you will never spread that pile the same way again. I'm Bill, though most folks online know me as Backyard Bill. I've spent 30 years learning hard lessons on a little piece of land in rural Ohio, and for too many of those years I fought my garden with a rototiller, bags of 10-10-10, and a shelf full of sprays I could not pronounce. My greatest teachers live right across the fence in the Amish community I am blessed to call my neighbors. Almost everything I'm going to tell you today came from my friend Daniel, and from the people who taught him long before I ever showed up with my tiller. So how did 3 completely different materials end up on the same pallet under the same word? A garden center has to move product, and soil amendment is a nice wide word. It covers a bag of shredded bark just as easily as it covers a year of a farmer's work behind the barn. So the 3 of them sit side by side in the same aisle, priced about the same, and the choice gets made by whichever bag is closest to the cart. Here is what that costs you, and it is not the $6 a bag. It costs you the season. For years, I spread whatever was cheapest every single spring, and my soil never actually changed. The clay stayed clay. The beds dried out by the 2nd week of July, and the same soft leaf plants got hit by the same insects year after year, and I blamed the bugs. There was one spring, my pepper plants came up faster and greener than anything on the road, and I was proud of them. That was a warning sign. I read it as a good sign. Hold on to that, because I promised you one of these 3 brings the aphids in, and that story's coming. Now, everything I'm about to show you is one layer of a much bigger system, and I wrote that whole system down in a book called The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. It is the complete old world system my Amish neighbors use to build a garden that defends itself from pests. No chemicals at all, laid out as a 30-day protocol any home gardener can follow. It starts with the 5 reasons modern gardens attract pests and Amish gardens do not. And it walks you through the 5 defense layers week by week, from kill nothing, build everything in the 1st week, to the self-defending garden in the 4th. 117 pages, and it is $17 right now, marked down from $47. $17, and that is less than 1 season of the sprays a lot of us keep buying again every spring. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So let's walk down to the first pile, because this is where it gets practical. Compost is the leftovers of things that have already been eaten: kitchen scraps, grass clippings, spent tomato vines, coffee grounds, all of it run through bacteria and worms in a compost bin until you cannot tell what any of it used to be. The finished compost is dark and crumbly, and it smells like the floor of the woods after a rain. And here is what compost is actually for, because it is not quite what the bag suggests. Compost does not really feed your plants. It feeds the soil, and the soil feeds your plants. There is some nitrogen in there, some phosphorus, some potassium, but the amounts are modest and they come out slow. What compost is really carrying is life, the fungi and the bacteria, the food they live on. That is why compost will never burn a root, and why you can put it on anything in your vegetable garden without lying awake about it. So here is how I use it. 1 inch across the whole bed every spring, worked lightly into the top 3 or 4 inches of soil. 1 inch, that is 1 inch, not 3, and there is no prize for going heavier. If a bed is truly worn out, you can go to 2 inches for a single season and then back to 1, and a word of caution about buying it in bags, because not all of it is finished. Open a bag before you spread it and take a handful. Squeeze it in your fist and then get your nose right down in it. Finished compost smells like a forest floor. If it smells sour or sharp like ammonia, or if the bag feels warm in your hands, that batch is still cooking, and cooking compost will pull nitrogen right back out of your soil while it finishes. Let a bag like that sit open in the corner of the yard for a month before it goes anywhere near your plants. Take your time. There is no rush. That handles your everyday feeding. And for most gardens, it is the one bag I would buy. But it leaves you with a second problem. And that second problem is the bed that has been growing sweet corn and squash and tomatoes for 10 years straight and has nothing left to give. That is where aged manure comes in. And I want to be careful with the word aged, because that word is doing all the work in this section. Aged manure is livestock manure mixed in with whatever bedding was under the animal's straw or wood shavings, stacked in a pile and left alone until it breaks down. On the farms around me, that means horse and cow manure in a pile behind the barn, turned a few times with a pitchfork and left to sit through a whole winter and a whole summer. Fresh manure out of the stall is a different material entirely. It is far too strong, it will burn young roots, and it does not belong anywhere near a food garden. So aged means 6 months at the very minimum, and a full year is better. 6 months at the minimum, a year is better, and I would rather you wait a season than rush that one. When it is ready, it looks like dark soil. It crumbles in your hand, and there is almost no smell left. What aged manure gives you that compost cannot is real nitrogen in a real amount. That is what a starved bed needs, and that is what a heavy feeder wants. So I put it on the heavy feeders only, which for me means sweet corn, squash and pumpkins and tomatoes early in the season. 1/2 inch is plenty. 1/2 inch, not 2 inches. And by the end of this video, you will understand why that matters more than anything else I am telling you today. And there are 2 places it should not go. Keep it off your root crops. Carrots and parsnips that get a big shot of nitrogen will fork and split, and you will pull up a fine head of green leaves with almost nothing underneath. And keep it away from your beans and your peas, because those plants make their own nitrogen down at the root, and adding more just gives you a beautiful vine with hardly any pods on it. And remember that thing I told you at the start about one of these 3 bringing more aphids into your garden. This is the pile. Hold that thought, because the why is worth the wait. Now the third one is the one almost nobody buys, and it is the one Daniel would tell you to make yourself. Behind Daniel's barn, there is a square wire bin about 4 feet across, holding nothing but oak and maple leaves. He rakes them in November, wets them down with a hose, and then he walks away and leaves them alone. A year later, sometimes 2, that bin holds a dark, spongy material that smells like the deep floor of the woods. That is leaf mold, and it costs nothing but the raking. Leaf mold is different from compost in one important way. Compost is mostly the work of bacteria, and a compost pile runs warm. Leaf mold is the work of fungi, and it runs cool and slow. Now, this is where folks get disappointed because leaf mold will not feed your plants. There is almost no nitrogen in it worth counting. What it does instead is hold water. Good leaf mold will hold several times its own weight in water and let it go slowly right through August when everything else in the garden is given up. It loosens heavy clay and it gives loose sand something to hold on to, and it feeds the fungal networks that your perennials, your berry bushes, and your fruit trees actually live on. There is a pest side to it too, and it surprised me when Daniel pointed it out. A mulched bed does not splash. When hard rain hits bare soil, it throws dirt and whatever is living in it up onto the lowest leaves of your plants, and that is how a good deal of leaf disease gets started. So how do you use it? 2 to 3 inches laid right on top of the soil and never dug in deep. 2 to 3 inches on top. It is a blanket, not a meal. And wait until your soil has warmed up in late spring before you lay it down, because leaf mold spread over cold, wet spring soil will hold that bed cold and wet. To make your own, run the lawnmower over the leaf pile first to shred it, load it into a wire bin, wet it down, and then walk away for a year. There is nothing else to do. That is the whole method. So that is what each one actually is. Now let me give you my verdict, because that is what you came for. If you can only buy one bag this spring, buy compost every time without thinking twice about it. It is the only one of the three that improves your soil, feeds your soil life, and cannot hurt a thing if you get the amount a little wrong. If your beds are genuinely worn out and your plants come up pale and stunted no matter what you do, then you need aged manure. And you need it in a small amount on the right crops at the right time of year. And if what you want is soil that gets better every year, soil that still holds moisture in the 3rd week of August, then you want leaf mold, and you want to start a pile this fall so you have it the fall after. But the real answer, the one Daniel gave me when I finally asked him which one was best, was that I was asking the wrong question. He said you would not stand in your shop and ask whether a hammer is better than a saw. Daniel put it better than I ever could. The compost is for the soil, the manure is for the plant, and the leaves are for the ground itself. And a garden needs all three of them at different times. It's not about fighting nature. It's about working with it. And that goes for the 3 piles at the end of your garden just as much as it goes for the bugs on your beans. So let me show you the way this actually runs across the season, because this is the part that took me the longest to understand. Daniel gardens in 4 beds, and the crops move 1 bed over every year. That is the 4-bed rotation, and I use it myself now. In the fall, the bed that is going to grow sweet corn and squash next year gets the aged manure, not in the spring. In the fall, that is deliberate. Letting it sit under the snow and the rain all winter lets the strength of it mellow and spread out through the soil. So by planting time, it feeds steadily instead of hitting all at once. In the spring, every bed gets its 1 inch of compost worked into the top few inches before anything goes in the ground. 1 inch of compost every bed, every spring. Then once the soil has warmed and the plants are up a few inches, the leaf mold goes on top of everything as a mulch. 2 to 3 inches right up to the plants, but not touching them. Leave a hand's width of clear soil around every stem. Mulch piled up against the stem holds water there, and that is an open invitation to rot and to slugs. And because the crops rotate 1 bed over each year, no bed on that farm ever gets the aged manure 2 years in a row. That last part is quiet, and it is doing more work than all the rest of it put together. So let me gather that up before we move on. The manure goes down in October on 1 bed only. The compost goes down in the spring on every bed, and the leaf mold goes on top in late spring, and then next year the whole rotation shifts 1 bed over. Now, before you go grab the wheelbarrow, there are 3 mistakes I made with these 3 materials, and I made every one of them more than once. The first is too much. Extra compost is mostly wasted money, extra leaf mold smothers, and extra manure is the one that causes real trouble, which is exactly where we are headed in a minute. The second is too fresh. When you are in doubt about a bag of compost or a pile of manure, let it sit one more season. Nothing at all is lost by waiting. The third is too deep. Leaf mold belongs on top of the bed, not 6 inches under it, because buried leaf mold loses the fungi that need air and leaves the surface of your soil bare again. Let the earthworms carry it down. They will do a better job of it than your garden fork ever could. And that brings us to the part I promised you at the very start. Why can the richest of these 3, the aged manure, actually bring more aphids into your garden? Here is what nitrogen does. And once Daniel explained it to me, I could not unsee it. A plant builds its new growth out of whatever is available to it. When there is a great deal of nitrogen in the soil, the plant grows fast, and fast growth is soft growth. The cell walls go up thin, the stems come up watery, and the new leaves at the top of the plant are tender enough that you can almost see light through them. That is the first half of it. The second half is what is inside that soft growth. When a plant takes up more nitrogen than it can build into solid tissue, that extra nitrogen sits in the sap as free amino acids. Now think about what an aphid actually does out there on your pepper plants. An aphid does not chew a leaf. It pushes a fine needle into the plant and it drinks the sap. So a soft, fast-grown shoot hands that insect 2 gifts at the same time: a thin wall that is easy to pierce and a sap that is richer to drink than anything else in the neighborhood. That is why the greenest, fastest, proudest looking plant in the garden is so often the one crawling with aphids by the 4th of July. A plant grown on compost and leaf mold does the opposite. It grows steadily, it grows a little slower, and it lays down thicker cell walls and denser tissue. That plant is every bit as healthy. It is simply harder to bite and less worth the trouble. So back to my pepper plants, the ones I was so proud of. Daniel came up the row one morning and he looked at those big soft green plants for a moment, and he said in that quiet way of his that I had grown a very fine meal. It took me most of a season to work out what he meant. I had not been growing peppers, I had been setting a table. So if your beds have been getting a heavy load of manure every spring, here is what I would do this year. Cut it back to 1/2 inch, move that application to the fall where the winter can mellow it, and then put your spring inch of compost and your late spring leaf mold on top of it instead. Give that 1 full season. The aphids will not vanish overnight, but your plants stop being the softest, easiest meal on the block, and the balance starts tipping back your way. Next April, when you are standing in front of those 3 pallets with a cart in your hands, you are not going to be guessing anymore. You will know exactly which one you came for and which one can wait until fall. And that is the heart of what Daniel taught me. What you put in the ground in October decides what shows up to eat in July. And that is only the first of the 5 defense layers. All 5 of them are in the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, laid out as 30 days. You can follow one at a time. 117 pages. $17 right now, marked down from $47. $17 one time against a shelf of sprays you buy again every single season. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. Compost feeds the soil, aged manure feeds the plant and only in small amounts, and leaf mold feeds the ground itself for years. Did your folks or your grandparents garden without chemicals? Tell me one thing they did below. Those are exactly the methods worth saving. I read every single one. Next time, I'm going to show you the common weed growing in your garden right now that tells you exactly what your soil is short on, and how Daniel can read a whole field just by walking across it. Work with nature, not against it, and I'll see you in the garden.